Well, hello again from Israel. I'm at a very special park, a very special place this morning. Um, and the Lord gave me a song earlier this year, and I really felt that I should come here, and this is the place to record it. I'm at a place known as, in the Bible, as Gideon Spring, or here in the Bible you'll read it as Harrod's Spring, Harods. And this is probably one of the most recorded, not the most recorded, but one of the most recorded stories of how God used one man, one group of people, and showed his power in Israel and overcame an extraordinary enemy, who that enemy could have crushed Israel at the time. And it's the story of Gideon. And this is actually the park, and it's the park now, it wasn't then, and Gideon and them would have been in these hills where I'm standing. And it's pretty good chance and accurate, as I've checked locally, that this is the spring, these are the hills, this is where that battle took place. And you can read a whole story in Judges chapter 5, 6, 7, 8 in that area. And so I wanted to come to you again this morning, and already having these encounters with people that verify a message. Gideon's story is all about a man, one man, whom God came in the form of the angel of the Lord, came as the captain of hosts to speak to Gideon. And Gideon at that time, you can read the story, Gideon at that time was trying to hide grain down in a wine press. And the reason he was doing that, because Israel was under absolute terror from the enemies of the Amorites and the Amalekites from across the way, over my shoulder and over in the mountains of Gilead. They were coming across from what is now Jordan and from that area, and they were raiding everything in Israel. And Israel had been under God's punishment, and they had been again fallen away from God. And so they would come in, they would steal all the cows, all the food, all the crops, and they would take all that and they would take it away from Israel. So Israel was hiding. And this man Gideon, who was probably a several hours hike or walk or camel ride from here, stopped here after God had gotten his attention. God got his attention and called him a mighty man of valor. And basically what Gideon said in modern English, what Gideon said was, me? I'm the least of the least. Look at me, I'm hiding here and hiding my food. So it doesn't sound like he had a whole lot of courage or strength at the time. And if you read the word, you'll find out that he was one whom God chose, not because of his strength, but because of his lack of it. And when he had his argument with God about whether he should go and fight the Amalekites, whether he should go and fight the Amorites and the Midianites, he said, the Lord said to him, go in the strength you have. And I really believe that that is the message from this place. And it is extraordinary. It's only my first time here in Israel, and you can see the spring or the river below the hill here. If you kind of zoom in, you'll see it. There's such a big crowd of students here today. I had to pick a higher place to be able to speak to you. So anyway, this story really has everything to do with hearing from God, being obedient to God, in spite of the weakness we feel. Now, I've felt like that many times in my life, and I'm sure many of you have as well. And so as I speak to you today from this place in Israel, I pray you get the message of what faith really is and how much God can do in one person or two people or a group of people. But in this case, he chose Gideon. You know, I was coming through the gate here at the park this morning, and I met a soldier who was a soldier here in Israel. And he and I had just an awesome chat, an awesome talk. And you know, he revealed something to me in our short chat. He talked about the fear he lived in. You know, the fear that he lived in as a soldier, you know, of enemies around him, not knowing any moment when someone could, a terrorist or someone could, you know, take his life or his family's life. And so you can imagine, here's this soldier, this modern day soldier, still here in this battlefield that happened thousands of years ago. And the soldiers that came here that day, that night, that the Lord called out. Well, after all of Gideon's arguments, he gave in, and he realized that this was God, and God was asking him to do an extraordinary feat. So he sent out an SOS to all the rest of Israel and in the outlying areas here to come and join them. And when they finally gathered them together, they had about 32,000 soldiers, it says in the Bible. It says in the Word. And so the Lord said, well, you got too many. The Lord, just when we think we got our best battle plan, God says, that's not my battle plan. Less is more with God. Because He wants to rescue us. He wants to love us, and He wants to help us out of our places, even with the little strength we have. So He told them, anyone that's timid or afraid or nervous, they could go back home again. And so that's what happened. And 22,000. That's a lot of people admitting, I really don't want to go, I'm afraid. So 22,000 returned. Now they were down to 10,000. And that fateful days before the battle, they came here to this place. And the Lord told Gideon to take these 10,000 men, to take these men, go down to this river, this spring. There's a beautiful spring here that comes out of under the cliff, and let them drink water. And everyone who kneels down and drinks the water like a dog lapping up water, those are the ones who are going to be separated. And there were 300 who took the water and cupped it in their hand. And you read it in here. I'm going to read that part for you now of how God separated. And I'll use my own last name, how He whittled down, a very large number of soldiers that they figured they would use against the Amalekites and would win the battle. But God had a different plan. And He says here, He said, so Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Harod. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Morah. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. Therefore tell the people, whoever is timid or afraid may leave and go home. 22,000 of them went home, leaving only 10,000 who were willing to fight. But the Lord told Gideon, there are still too many. Bring them down to the spring, and I will sort out who will go with you and who will not. This is that spring over my shoulder, and you hear all the noise of the young people in the park here. When Gideon took his warriors down to the water, the Lord told him, divide the men into two groups. In one group put all those who cup water in their hands, and all those who lap it up with their tongues like dogs. In other groups put all those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream. Only 300 of the men drank from their hands. All the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream. The Lord told Gideon, with these 300 men I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home. So Gideon collected the provisions and ram's horns and other warriors and sent them home, but he kept the 300 men with him. Now the Midianite camp was in the valley just below Gideon, which is right behind me here. During the night the Lord said, get up, go down into the Midianite camp, for I have given you victory over them. And so Gideon went down into the valley. He was still doubtful. He was after asking the Lord for signs to show him that it really was God. And you know what? It's not wrong to ask our Father for confirmations. You know, like Gideon. Gideon wasn't used to hearing God's voice or hearing from God. Of course, the Lord appeared to Gideon in angel form, but still, he doubted right to the last. Right here, he was camped that night, and the Lord knew he was still afraid. He said, go down and listen in on their conversations. So they went down into the valley here, after they picked out 300 men out of 32,000. Go down here and listen to what they're saying. And one of them, the enemy, had a dream of a loaf of bread, barley bread, rolling down from the hill here and crushing the tent. And some of us wouldn't interpret it that way, but he said, surely we're done for. We're done for. The Israelites are going to crush us. And so the Lord set it up when Gideon and them surrounded the hills here and blew their horn shofars and smashed their lanterns and released the light. All of a sudden, God sent confusion into the enemy's camp, and they all began to kill each other. It says in the Word that they were as thick as locusts, camels, and soldiers from all over the other side of the Jordan, all the way around. They were as thick as locusts, and they all turned on each other. And thousands and thousands and thousands died here that day, and they kept running until they ran towards the mountains of Gilead, crossed the Jordan. So Gideon, when he roared out, he said, "The sword of the Lord and the sword of Gideon." And so they marched into battle. But here was a man who, first of all, was giving God his reasons why he couldn't go. And he kept asking God for signs and signs of his faith. You know, this is an extraordinary place, and many Jewish people camp here. This is a wonderful place, a beautiful oasis, where lots of kids come. There was like 2,000 people here the other day. I thought the Midianites were back. But to think all these generations later, this park was filled with cheering and children and campers for the Feast of Tabernacles. Isn't that extraordinary? But we have to stop and think, think about how the Lord said, go in the strength you have. Go in the strength you have. How many of us are trying to be obedient to God? Be obedient to God and to listen to what He's asking us to do. I wrote down a couple of notes here, and just to remind myself, that faith, and what faith is. Faith is hearing from God, and acting on that faith will produce what you've heard from God. We have so many different angles. Faith is knowing. Well, knowing what? Knowing what God's will is. Hearing from God. Counseling with others who hear from God, so that we can confirm that it was God. But God is asking us in this hour, many of us, to go in the strength we have. Because we are living in an hour and a day when there are Midianites and Amorites and all the ites in different spiritual form rising up all over the world. Christians just over the mountains there are being murdered. They're being executed for their Christian belief. And we live in a world where now good is evil and evil is good. And so let's not be a part of that. Let's rise up. Let's have faith. And this song that the Lord gave me regarding faith, and before I met with a person back in my home in Canada, and he and I have been talking a lot about Gideon and the men of valor, and praying to God that He would raise up men and women of valor, meaning that it's not because of their strength, it's not because of how educated they are, or if they're ordained or not ordained, if they have paperwork or not. It's whether or not they believe God, and they hear from God and trust God, because there is a battle on. And that in that battle, God said to Gideon, before he ever fought, He said, the victory is yours, and the victory is ours. But around us many are lost, and we have to have faith and take steps of faith to secure other salvation by telling them the good news. Like the soldier I met coming in here this morning through the gate, confessing to me, how difficult it was being in the army here, being a soldier, never knowing when they're not allowed to hitchhike here, and because men have gotten killed. And not everyone on either side I'm not saying that there are beautiful, beautiful, wonderful people on both sides of the fence, but hatred and evil and war just brings out the very, very worst in all of us. However, we as God's children are to fight a different battle, a different battlefield, one with an unseen enemy usually, and that's spiritual battle. So may we have the faith that God gives us, and to hear His voice and know what He wants. And so with a little faith, we can do great and tremendous things in Jesus Christ. And I've been having an extraordinary journey here in Israel on this particular trip. And I've wanted to record some of it, to share it with some of you, to encourage you. It is an extraordinary life to live with God and with Jesus Christ. And if you don't know that, just ask Him. Just ask Him. He will meet you where you're at. He will take you places you could never have imagined, both spiritually and even in the natural. Who would have ever thought that someone where I come from would end up in Israel, being honored by God to be able to come here, to be able to speak to people throughout the world? Who would ever think it? I would have thought myself the least of the least. The son of a fisherman. A fisherman myself at one time. No formal education, no university degrees, nothing going for me really, as we would say in the natural world. And yet, I had everything going for me, because God was with me. God was on my side. I didn't know it at a young age, but I know it now. And yeah, do I still get afraid in some of the battles? Do I still get fearful when I got to go on a mission? Well, when the Lord even told me to come on this mission, to come here this time, just days before I came, my car decided to blow up. It didn't blow up. I'm exaggerating. Stuff went on it, and it cost me the money I had for this trip. And I thought, well, in peace, I rested in it and thought, well, Lord, you'll do what you do. And so I met with someone a few days before I came, and they said, here, and they gave me an offering and said, here, I'm supposed to give you this. And so from one man to another, you know, we all share in this battle. And I went, thank you very much. And then more came, and somebody else I met halfway in Canada helped out, and God will just provide. And it's our privilege to walk out once we know what His will is. So go in the little faith that you have. And try not to be afraid. Fear is not a reason not to go. Fear can be a hindrance, but it doesn't have to stop us. It has stopped me many times in my life, and I'm sure it'll stop some of you. Well, don't let it stop you anymore. Be ready to hear God's voice. Act on His word. And know that with a little faith, you can do great things. So this is the song that the Lord laid on my heart earlier this year. And it's to take this little faith and grow a fruitful tree. Take this little faith in me. Take this tiny mustard seed. Take what a little I may believe. Take it and grow a fruitful tree. Take this little faith in me. Take this tiny mustard seed. Take what little I may believe. Take it and grow a fruitful tree. Let the gardener do his work. Grow the seed and cultivate the earth. Let the gardener have the final say. The seed will grow at the end of days. Take this little faith in me. Take this tiny mustard seed. Take what a little I may believe. Take it and grow a fruitful tree. Grown by the hands of Jesus, grown by the water of His word, grown by the love He has given, grown by His blood in the earth. Take this little faith in me. Take this tiny mustard seed. Take what little I may believe. Take it and grow a fruitful tree. Take this little faith in me. Take it and grow a fruitful tree. So we can let God take what little is in us and go in the strength we have and do extraordinary feats with God. That might be right in your own neighborhood, next door. And He will give you the courage. Not only the courage, He'll give you the power and the strength to do what you need to do. Let's not be victims anymore in this world where things have beaten us down and broken us up. You're looking at someone who shouldn't be alive, who was beaten down and beaten down and beaten down. But God had a different plan to build up, to lift up, and to restore. And He restored Israel that day. He restored Israel for 40 years of peace after that. Because one man, or one woman, whoever that might be, would hear and obey God. Not because obedience to a parent is going to whip you. Obedience because you've known that He loves you. And when you love someone, you want to please them. You want to do what brings a smile to their face. Take this little mustard seed, take it and grow a fruitful tree. From what I call the Garden of Gideon, Gideon Spring, Arid Spring. Thanks for being with me in these few moments. And I think that little bird has the last word, singing his song. So the Lord bless and keep you. Go in the strength you have and become a mighty man or woman for God. Believe that God cares and loves you and will restore you and lift you up even from your most hidden place where you're hiding away, where you're trying to run or get away. God sees you. He always sees you, and He's waiting. Just turn. Invite Him. Help me, Jesus. So God bless you from Israel.
זה לנו מפה, אי אפשר יותר להמשיך. רואים, הכל סגור ומגודר. בואו נחזור.